Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and I'm joined today by my corrupted co-host, the diabolical Darren.
Hiya, good to be here as always, and looking forward to talking some Creepshow.
Yep, and that's today's podcast. We're going to be devoting it to 1982's Creepshow, obviously a horror anthology. Directed by George A. Romero and actually written by Stephen King. And this is one of my favourite anthology films. I'm a huge fan of anthologies in general. Be it TV, be it film. The Twilight Zone, as I've probably mentioned 15 million times before, is my all-time favourite TV series. Not just anthologies, but just my favourite TV series, full stop. I love Tales from the Crypt, the TV show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the list goes on. I don't know about you, Darren, but I'm a huge fan of the Amicus films like Tales from the Crypt and obviously Asylum and The House that Dripped Blood and that.
Yeah, I really like Tales from the Crypt, the movie. They got like a really good segment with Joe Collins with like a killer Santa Claus. I love that one.
Yeah.
What was the other ones you mentioned? I really like, trying to think, Cat's Eye is one I really like.
Well, yeah, in the 80s, there was kind of a resurgence of anthologies, with the likes of, Creepshow, Cat's Eye, there's one called After Midnight as well. Obviously, we have the Twilight Zone movie. We had Tales from the Dark Side movie. But yeah, I'm a big fan of them. Obviously, Amicus churned out a lot of anthologies. Their very first one being Dr. Terror's House of Horror, starring the legends that are, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Creepshow is very much a love letter, a homage to the classic EC horror comics of the 1950s. Very much in the spirit of them comic books. Now, I used to read them comic books a lot as a kid. I love, the three big ones I used to read were Tales from the Crypt, the Haunt of Fear, and the Vault of Horror. And, a lot of people within the horror industry do cite them books as an influence. George A. Romero and Stephen King have actually said that, they used to read these comics themselves. They were the kind of comics back in the day that parents didn't want their kids reading. They caused quite some controversy back then. And from what I know, Stephen King and George A. Romero were friends, and they'd always wanted to collaborate. They'd always wanted to work on something together. And this was the project. This is the project that came their way.
I think they got Tom Savini on board pretty early on as well, because he worked a lot with George in the past. Yeah. And, like you say, it come out of the fact that their real love for these comics. I think George and certainly Tom Savini says a story where he was used to go under the covers in his bed with a torch and read the comics. I've never really got a chance to see or read the comics, and for some reason I couldn't get hold of them when I was younger. They weren't around, my area.
Well, I would recommend anyone that's a fan of just anthologies in general, or comics, horror comics in general. You can actually get the books as part of hardcover editions now. I own the complete collection. Of course, we got Tales from the Crypt, the TV series that first aired in 1989 that ran for 7 seasons, very successful show. But let's just talk about this film, because as I said, this is very much a film that's kind of an ode to old school horror. It knows exactly what it is. With this movie, let's talk about the wrapper. I mean, this film has a great cast. Let's talk about the cast. I mean, Tom Atkins, who really doesn't need an introduction to anyone that's a horror fan. And do you know what I love about the opening to this film? Is, we've got Tom Atkins, who's basically kind of bullying his son. Why are you reading this crap, all this horror crap? This is garbage. I'm going to throw this garbage away and all that. And what's really interesting about this is kind of like taking it back to the 50s, because there were a lot of parents that did view these comics in such a way.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And Tom Atkins, he really plays, the asshole character really well. Yeah. And you've got the kid then, he obviously cursing out his dad then, he hopes he rots in hell and all that. And I just think this is just a perfect, like you say, love letter to the old comics. Yeah. A great way to start the film.
Yeah, politicians, actually, by the way, the comic code was introduced in the 1950s and these books were eventually banned. You know, they're now obviously, you know, they were blamed for juvenile delinquency and all sorts back then. And Tom Atkins is very much kind of a representation of some of the parents back then. You know, he's berating these comics, they're crap, it's horror shit. I like where he says, you know, after he sent him to his bed, you know, after slapping him, who, and of course the kid is actually Stephen King's son, isn't he?
That's right, yeah. And he doesn't do too bad a job, you know, considering he wasn't an actor or anything.
Yeah. I think Atkins was very kind of apprehensive, wasn't he, during the filming of that scene? Because, to hit Stephen King's son, and Stephen King actually wanted to be there on set, didn't he, to see this, to govern this.
That's right, yeah. And I think actually now they're still even, they email each other all the time, apparently, Tom Atkins and Stephen King's son. Yeah. So they've remained really good friends, which is good.
Yeah. Now, what I like is, he says, and he sits down with his wife, doesn't he? He says, you see that crap, that horror crap? You know, things coming out of crates, eating people, dead people coming back to life, people turning into weeds. He's actually giving us foreshadowing. He's actually telling us some of the stories in advance here, isn't he?
That's right, yeah. And I didn't realise that it was a made-up comic, basically. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't an original comic with all these stories in.
No.
So they had to make it for the production. But, yeah, it's a cracking way to open.
Well, the comic in the film, which was obviously made specifically for the film, was actually drawn and inked by Jack Kamen, who was one of the artists for the original EC horror comics of the 50s.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, to give it to that level of authenticity, they were actually using one of the big illustrators, comic artists, for that comic line, as very much as a tribute to his books. And then, of course, there was a comic release to coincide, you know, with the movie. Now, is it me, or is Tom Atkins, correct me if I'm wrong, is he struggling to keep a straight face?
I don't know. I didn't get that from it.
I got a little bit like Atkins. I don't know. I got the impression. I might be completely wrong here. It looked like he was having a fun time with this, and he was kind of struggling to keep a straight face. That's taking nothing away from it. I absolutely love Tom Atkins. I really do.
Oh, he's a legend.
But yeah, I got the impression that he was. There's a bit of a smile there.
It wouldn't surprise me because, like, in the interviews I've seen that he's done, he just, you know, said he got on so well with George. He just said the old production was fun. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, and it's also interesting as well that this was the only George A. Romero directed film where he didn't actually write the screenplay.
That's right. Yeah.
It was written, of course, by Stephen King. Now, two of the stories in this film were actually based on two stories of his already that he'd already published. So yeah, he actually wrote the film. So you know, I think we're gonna how we're gonna do this. We're gonna kind of go through segment to segment. So with the first segment, I know the first segment is a lot of people's favourite. Actually, it's one of the more popular of the five. I'm just gonna quickly preface it. I don't think there's any bad segments in this film. I don't. I think, like any anthology, there's always, you know, some segments, some stories that are going to be better than others. That's always the case, okay?
Yeah.
I don't think there's any bad segments in this film. I think there's some segments that are better than others, and there's some that I certainly prefer. So the first one, Father's Day, which is like something that's ripped right out of them EC comics. We get Ed Harris in this, don't we?
Yeah, again, I don't know how famous he was at the time, but I know, you know, that he got on well with George, and he did it as a favour, from what I was reading. And he sort of makes. We'll come on to that in a minute, but he makes like a little funny dance.
Well, he was giving John Travolta a run for his money, wasn't he? If you ever want to see a younger Ed Harris dance, then, you know, just watch Creepshow. Yeah, he's in there, and obviously it's a revenge tale, because essentially what the EC horror comics always were, they were morality tales. Quite often it's bad people who have committed bad deeds, and karma comes back to get them. That is very often the case in these stories, and obviously this was the case in this story. So it's called Father's Day, isn't it? And do you want to take us through the story, Darren, what the basic synopsis kind of is in this?
Yeah, basically, Aunt Bedelia visits, and years earlier, the story goes that she killed her father, who was quite abusive.
Yeah.
And she was looking after him. I think he ended up having a stroke. And his constant demands for cake and everything. And she ended up, I think her father as well, she was going out with this guy as well at the time.
Yeah.
And her father got him killed.
Yeah, he engineered his death, didn't he? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. So basically, she ends up killing him with like a marble ashtray.
Yeah.
And then every Father's Day, then she goes back to the house where they have this gathering.
Yeah. And of course, he comes back. He didn't get his cake. He wants his cake. And yeah, in this episode, obviously, kind of a jump scare sequence, really, isn't it? Where his hand comes out the grave. She's sitting there drunkenly rambling to him and all that, and his hand comes out and obviously zombified and that. I absolutely love the look, because obviously, as you said, Tom Savini was involved with this film. He did all the practical effects and all that, and a very good job, in fact, as well. I actually love the look of the zombified guy, the zombified dad in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, George Romero, well known for doing zombie films.
Yeah. So
it was ironic he was going to do, because he does 2 zombie films in this film.
Yeah.
And the old look. I love the actual look of the mansion as well. It's quite atmospheric. You got the fog machines out where the grave is, and I really like this. That's a few of the stories a bit hit and miss for me, which I will go into later.
Yeah.
But I think this one is really good. It's up there with one of the best.
I think with Creepshow, the stories are simplistic. Okay. With the EC horror comics of like the 50s and that. There were stories that were very kind of, how do I put it, simplistic. Somebody dies, they come back from the grave, and then there were other stories that were really quite clever, in their twists and that. Creepshow is just kind of old school horror. The stories there's no kind of like big twists or anything like that. This is just kind of going back to the roots of kind of old school horror, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
It knows what it is, and obviously she gets strangled, and the death with, and it's funny actually with Ed Harris's death, because he lets out this really kind of girly little yelp, doesn't he?
Yeah. It's quite, because you got he accidentally falls into the grave, I believe, and then you got this gravestone, which I don't know if the zombie, father is actually controlling it with his mind or whatever, but it falls on him. Yeah, it's quite a good death sequence. There's a couple of good death sequences.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it's weird actually, because this isn't just kind of a traditional zombie. It's like you said, he uses kind of telekinesis or whatever to cause the gravestone. To fall on Ed Harris. I think the next death's pretty cool. Obviously, she gets the character's name is escaping me, but of course her head gets twisted round, doesn't it? Her neck broken.
Yeah, Sylvia, I believe is the character. That's another good shot. And again, like you say, it's just basic. It's basic storytelling, but it's so clever in the way it's done. You know, you've got with the comic book sort of interacting sometimes with the vignettes. So it's this one I really like. And then, of course, he ends up killing, the housekeeper as well, Sylvia. And the actual icing on the cake for me, literally, no pun intended, is the end when the zombie father comes out and he's got Sylvia's head on the plate. Yeah. I think that's fantastic.
Got my birthday cake. Yeah, it's a cool final shot, actually. I mean, they just tried to bring the EC horror comics to life for the screen, and I think they did a good job. I think overall they did a very good job with it. The presentation of it is, like you said, how it transitions from one scene to another, from like going from one comic panel to another.
I don't think it was ever done at the time.
I don't believe it was. No, that's what I mean. That's what really makes it stand out from a lot of the other anthologies and so forth and horror films of the time, is that it was unique in its presentation. And I really like, and it happens in pretty much, I think, at least 4 of the 5 segments, we get them shots, because you might have to remind me here, Darren, what was the name of the cinematographer? Because there's some shots in this film, obviously, that have like red lighting and that, and they look great. It's like a comic panel come to life.
Yeah, just trying to look now. I haven't got it here offhand, but we can come back to that if you want.
Yeah, because the cinematography, very kind of Argento-esque. There's some great lit scenes in this film with red lighting and that, and it really looks very kind of Argento-esque. There's a few moments in the film.
Michael Gornick, I believe.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, his name was escaping me. Yeah, so some good cinematography. Like I say, it's just like the way it's presented, the way the film is presented. When we get the moments where the character, for example, near the end when they're kind of screaming and obviously, you know, the zombified father is there with a birthday cake. It's just, it's very well done. Now, the second segment is my least favourite. Very notable for starring Stephen King himself, though.
Yeah, it's my second least favourite, and I really don't like this one at all, to be honest.
Okay.
I love three of the stories. I love the wraparound story, and then there's two I don't really like at all.
Okay, well, I believe this one was called The Lonely Death of
Geordie Verrill.
Yeah, and he's the only actor. He carries this segment. He's the only. Well, actually, there is an actor in some kind of like imagination sequences or whatever, but for the most part, this is Stephen King's segment. Playing this kind of country bumpkin, this kind of hillbilly. He's clearly not too smart. I think he actually does a good job of playing goofy. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
It's played like a satire. It's played very kind of sitcom-esque.
It's based on a short story by Stephen King himself called Weeds.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And I think the other guy that you alluded to was Bingo O'Malley, who played a couple of different characters.
Oh, right,
obviously plays his father at one point.
Yeah. In this, obviously, meteorite lands near him, and he kind of like, he gets his maybe he'll be rich, and he gets this kind of imagination sequence, doesn't he? Of like this money being handed his way, and then obviously it ends up breaking. He gets that imagination sequence of they're now basically calling him a klutz. He's not getting any money, etc. And obviously he starts to become overgrown. He touches it, and obviously there's overgrown weeds everywhere, and he starts slowly. From what I understand, he actually had an allergic reaction to the makeup that he had to wear for this. Yeah, he was actually subjected to shots and medication. Yeah, he had a lot of. Yeah, it didn't go down too well, him having to wear all that. But from what I also understand as well, he basically plays it as kind of Wile E. Coyote, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's kind of Roadrunner-ish, isn't it, really? I don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of the segment itself, but I think Stephen King in general does a really good job in the acting. And there is one line when he says meteor shit. I think that's one of the best lines. Oh,
that's brilliant. Oh, that's one of the best lines. We're going to get to my favourite line soon, but that is one of my favourite lines in the film. Meteor shit. I love it.
It's the way he says it, like. It's just so funny.
He does a good job, because, as I said, he's not playing this seriously. This is played for laughs. This is kind of a satire, almost, if you will, and I think he does a good job. It is the weakest segment, in my opinion, in the film, but even then, it's not bad. It just doesn't... It doesn't hold up as well as some of the others. But at the same time, with this segment as well, I've actually lost my train of thought now, what I was going to say regarding this. Yeah, I know
Tom Atkins wanted to play the part of Geordie Verrill.
He did, yeah.
And obviously they'd already cast Stephen King, so George said, I've got a part for you in the wraparound story if you want. So that's how Tom Atkins come about.
And I'm glad we got him in the wraparound.
Yeah, actually, he's perfect.
Really glad. I'm always welcome to see Tom Atkins. But I actually felt sorry for Geordie Verrill at the end of this. I feel sorry for the guy. Basically, he said, he's completely overgrown now, isn't he? And he wants to commit suicide. And he's just like, please, God, let my luck be in just this once. And he blows his head off.
But I found, with that, in the end, where, you've got the weather forecast. And I know it's all shot goofily and whatever, but it just made no sense to me at all, the ending. I know you've got to, again, like we always say it, don't we, suspend disbelief. But it just fell flat for me, the ending and the whole segment.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, the thing is, I just want to quickly say this about Stephen King as well. I don't know if you read this, found this out or anything, but apparently Stephen King took his son to McDonald's, and as a joke, his son, right, was made up with bruises, cuts, and scabs.
No,
just as a joke, and the girl at the drive-through window called the police when she saw him. Yeah, the kid was done. Now, getting back to that slap sequence at the beginning. I believe that Joe actually kind of slapped himself as well, because when you actually look at him, Will back, he's actually kind of holding his hand as he does it.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think he's actually kind of like slapping himself, and they pulled it off well, actually, because it had to be like a very quick cut that you don't actually kind of notice that. But yeah, the second segment is my least favourite of the bunch. But even then, it's just notable to see Stephen King, because we don't really see... Stephen King obviously shows up and has made plenty of cameos and that over the years in TV shows and films, but for him to be the lead in something...
Yeah.
Something that
like I say, he does a good job, and it just wasn't, I don't know, it just wasn't for me.
But yeah, so the third segment, which is good. I really do like the third segment. It's notable for starring Leslie Nielsen. Now, this was obviously a few years before he played Frank Drebin in The Naked Gun. Just a couple of years, of course, after Airplane, because Airplane, and obviously Police Squad, they're the things that really turned him into a comedy star. So it's weird. It feels weird seeing Leslie Nielsen playing a villain.
That's right, and of course he did Prom Night as well, where he plays the father.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. He is just so good in everything he does, whether it be comedy, where the guy was an absolute legend. I think the whole cast for this segment was superb. You got Ted Danson coming up. I think during the filming of this, he found out that he got the Cheers gig.
Oh, yeah.
And you got Gillian Ross, who, funny enough, she did Dawn of the Dead, and she did the film Madman.
Oh, yeah.
But she does not want to ever talk about Madman, so I don't know, why she's happy to talk about Creepshow, Dawn of the Dead, but won't speak about Madman. But that could be another episode. But yeah, I really like this episode. I think this is up there. And a couple of days ago, this would have been my favourite, but having rewatched it, I think The Crate is my favourite at the moment.
Yeah.
But this is really solid, I will admit.
Yeah. It's funny because, Leslie Nielsen did start his career, and for many decades, as a serious actor. It wasn't really until Airplane, released in 1980, that he became a comedy star, and this obviously a couple of years later. Ted Danson, of course, famous for Cheers. I think that's essentially what landed him the role, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Apparently, during the filming, he got the call, and he said to George Romero, I got this thing, I'm not really sure about it, where... and he explained what the sitcom was about and all that. And then, he just went on to superstardom after that, didn't it?
Yeah. So this is kind of a, your typical revenge from beyond the grave tale. And what makes this segment kind of stand out to me, actually, is the nature of it. The being buried up to the neck in sand. And, having to try and... it's an endurance test, if you will. And, Leslie Nielsen, obviously, Ted Danson wants to find out where his... Because, obviously, they've been cheating. I'm assuming that actually she was with Leslie Nielsen, has been cheating on him, hasn't she?
Yeah, they've both been cheating on... I think Richard is the guy, Leslie Nielsen's character. And, basically, he's not happy with this, as you can tell. And... he puts him through all sorts of shenanigans, doesn't he?
Yeah. So they're buried obviously up to the neck in sand, and obviously he's getting, unfortunately, to see his partner actually having to endure it herself. And of course, Leslie Nielsen. There's actually a moment where he's actually sitting there watching it, and is there kind of like a flicker of guilt almost, like where he's feeling a little bit bad? Did you notice that?
I didn't notice that offhand, no.
There's like one little bit. It's in Leslie Nielsen's performance there. It's very subdued, but there's a little moment, because obviously he's getting revenge. He gets Ted Danson in there as well. And it's when he's actually sitting there in his nice, lush apartment, and he's watching it on the monitor. And there's a little moment. It's when he's watching his partner Not Ted Danson, but her. And there's a little flicker, just for a couple of seconds or so, and I always noticed that. And of course, Ted Danson gives him that look, I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you in that. And then, of course, it's not long, is it? It's not long until they show up. And
the effects on that, Tom Savini effects, I thought was fantastic.
The effects are
great.
Again,
another zombie tale, which George does really well anyway.
Yeah.
I think, the actual, when they come back, you've got them very sort of slow moving zombies, and then they just keep saying, hold your breath, and I thought, it's really well done.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of like, ghosts as well, because they've got the art of teleportation, because obviously he goes into the room, doesn't he, locks it, turns around, and that's where they're right behind him.
That's right, yeah. And again, you've got the old, I don't know if you noticed, I think you mentioned it earlier, you've got the Argento Lightning in sort of, in every story there's a little bit of like that Argento Lightning, which I think George must have, from what I was reading, I think he had a chat with Argento around about, a year or so before, and Argento give him a few, tips on how to do the lighting and that.
Yeah. So with that sequence, and then we get that moment, don't we, where it turns into a comic panel, pretty much, where we see Leslie Nielsen kind of screaming, and then we get that kind of like red, you know what I mean, that kind of red background that he's kind of composed in, and it's them shots that I really love. Like I really love them shots that we get, and obviously the Creepshow TV series, which has just finished its second season, follows that exact same formula. It follows that same format, where we get them moments. There's quite a lot of them moments where it essentially kind of turns into a comic panel almost.
Yeah, very successful as well. I've only seen a couple of the episodes, but from what I hear, I've not seen anything from season 2. But yeah, it's very good apparently.
Yeah. So I think overall, I think it's a good segment. As I said, I'm always like, it's hard to believe, because obviously, Leslie Nielsen become famous for being a comedy star, certainly later on in his career. But when you actually see him, now I've only ever seen him in one other thing where he was kind of villainous. And I'm not going to count Dracula Dead and Loving It in 95. I know he's Dracula, but it's a spoof, it's a comedy. There's an episode, a very good episode actually, from Night Gallery, the anthology, and he plays a guy, he's got a patch on his eye, he claims to be fearless, nothing scares him, blah blah, and he decides to spend the night in a supposedly haunted house for money to prove that he's not scared of anything. I don't know if you've seen that, it's a good segment.
That sounds right up my alley. No, I've never seen it, but I'll certainly be trying to check that out now.
Yeah, it's a good episode. It's a favourite. I know some people that actually rate this because it's called, what is it? Something to Tide Over.
Something to Tide You Over. Yeah,
yeah.
And for me, I think it's the second best for me.
The next segment is my favourite. I mean, you've got three, Hal Holbrook in this, Fritz Weaver, and the ever-wonderful Adrienne Barbeau.
This is just an absolute masterclass in, I don't know what you would call it, really. It's like a monster, like a miniature monster movie, or there's a few things, there's even like slasher elements where I love where the creature actually, offs these people. But, this is by far, I think, the standout episode.
Yeah. And it's notable, right? This was the first time that Tom Savini had ever actually created an animatronic. So the Arctic monkey in this film, the creature in the crate that we do see a little later, was an animatronic, and I believe Tom Savini had actually contacted Rob Bottin, and they'd spent like an hour and a half on the telephone to try and get all the advice you could get to actually create this creature for this segment. Yeah,
and the whole look is like that Tasmanian devil. It's like a Tasmanian devil crossed with like an ape.
Yeah, it's
so
very.
Good.
It's basically I think I think they nicknamed it Fluffy. I think most of the monsters, creatures, and stuff in this film were actually given nicknames, and I think it was George A. Romero that actually nicknamed this thing Fluffy. During filming. Now, there's a nice little nod to John Carpenter as well. I don't know if you noticed on the crate, but on the crate it's going to the Arctic and it actually says Carpenter on the crate.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, a great little nod to 82's The Thing, I believe, which was, again, the very same year.
Yeah, and wasn't Adrienne Barbeau married to John Carpenter
She was. Yeah, she was. I believe this was there. I'm not sure if this was there, because I think they did, obviously, Escape from New York, this, The Fog, and there was one more, Two Evil Eyes, I believe it was. So she actually starred in 4 Carpenter works. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm incorrect there. But yeah, Adrienne Barbeau, frigging great. I love her in this. I mean, I love her anyway. I loved her in The Fog, and obviously she was in 82's Swamp Thing, again the same year, directed by Wes Craven. Adrienne Barbeau is someone that has worked with some of the biggest horror directors out there. Romero, Craven, Carpenter. And yeah, she plays the, obviously Hal Holbrook is the very henpecked husband in this, isn't he?
Yeah, I think this is her favourite role, apparently, from what she's ever filmed.
Okay.
She liked it because she was so far not her.
Yeah.
In real life, she's not like that, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't think she's ever drunk in her life, she said. But yeah, the old cast of this, you got Hal Holbrook, who plays the henpecked, husband really well.
Yeah.
Adrienne Barbeau, I don't know, you think she was drunk. She really is that good. She can just pull that off.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic story.
Yeah. Fritz Weaver is actually obviously a long, illustrious career. Was actually in one of my all-time favourite Twilight Zone episodes called Third from the Sun from season 1. He was actually in that. Now, Adrienne Barbeau in this, just the stuff she comes out with. I mean, it's just you'd want to kill her if you had a wife like that. I mean, saying that, but she
watch what you say.
Yeah, I know. I've got a fiance, so she actually voices Selena Kyle, Catwoman, in the 92 Batman the Animated Series as well. She was actually a perfect fit for that as well, because she has got quite a sultry voice. Not in this, obviously, but in the likes of The Fog, and obviously she kind of reprised a very similar role for Tales of Halloween, which, another anthology film. I love the stuff that she comes out with. I love the line, "Call me Billy, everyone does."
Yeah.
And I
actually love the early on as well, where you get Henry and he's daydreaming and killing her. I think there's two scenes of that. And
there is. Brilliant. That was going to get me to that moment, actually, where she turns around and she says, "Henry, what's wrong now?" And he points the gun at her and he says, not a thing, Wilma. And he just shoots her in the head. Everything's just fine. And then we see her corpse lying there, bullet hole in the head, and everyone gives him a round of applause.
Exactly, and there's men all over the world watching that, who can relate to that as well.
I love that moment. Yeah, that daydreamy, shoot her in the head, and just the round of the applause that he gets given, and then later he actually imagines strangling her. But yeah, I love it. Yeah, she's like, I think she says it like 2 times in the film. She's like, "Oh, call me Billy, everyone does." I love it when he's trying to feed her to the Arctic monkey, and he says. Great. This is my favourite line in the whole film, by the way. This is my favourite line. And he says, he's trying to push her in there, and he says, "Just tell it to call you Billy, you bitch."
Yeah.
I love it.
I just... And the way he plays the whole scene, Hal Holbrook, where he's laughing as well, and he's, you don't know if it's, he's laughing on purpose or what. He just seems completely sort of not with it.
Yeah.
And, that's great. But the lead up to that, mind, where you've got like the janitor who gets killed, and you've got the biologist who's running around frantically, he don't know what to do. And then he gets this student involved and he gets killed as well.
Yeah.
Some of the most, funniest. And it's played so straight as well, but some of it is really funny.
Yeah, I think the crate's a great segment. The creature itself is great. I love that shot we get of kind of the eyes. The first guy obviously gets dragged in there into the crate. He gets killed, dragged in, and then of course later on the Arctic monkey comes out and chomps on the guy's neck, and you kind of get the bite marks. It's a pretty cool little effect, actually. And then he gets slashed across the face as well. And, she, obviously she gets killed in that. And at the end, they're kind of like, he dumps the crate, doesn't he? He dumps the crate in the river or whatever, and he says, like, what if it gets out? Oh, it won't get out. And then that final shot is, it gets out, doesn't it? The final shot of the segment is we actually get to see the Arctic monkey's eyes. It shows the eyes.
Yeah, I think this is like up there with some of Savini's best work for me. I know it's very much nothing like, stuff like The Prowler or The Burning and stuff like that he worked on. But in terms of like a monster sort of, effect, I think Fluffy was one of the best he's ever done. In that regard.
And again, I just want to quickly say there's actually an episode of Tales from the Dark Side, again another anthology series that ran for 4 seasons, that George A. Romero himself was attached to. There's actually a creature in that in one of the episodes. I believe the episode is the title is escaping me. Trick or Treats or something. I can't remember. Oh, no, Halloween Candy. That's it, Halloween Candy. And there is a creature in that is quite similar to the Arctic monkey. And I'm wondering, I don't know if Tom Savini created that as well. But when I see the creature in that episode, it reminds me of the Arctic monkey from the crate.
Right, that's again, I've not checked that. I'll have to look into that.
But Tom Savini actually did direct one of the episodes as well. I think it's called Monster in the Closet. Or something like that, something along them lines. And that was actually quite a creepy episode as well. So I think The Crate is a really strong segment, actually. Adrienne Barbeau, she's just friggin' fantastic in that segment. Just, she's constantly belittling him. And, kind of near the end, what is it she says to him? Like, you're not even a man. When's the last time you were a man in the bed?
That's right, yeah.
You've got shit for brains. You can't really blame him.
And everyone watching that segment, throughout the whole segment, it's coming. You just can't wait till you see him get his revenge on her. And it's a really good payoff when it does happen, because it's done really well. Yeah. Because it actually puts you in a false sense where you don't think it's going to happen for a minute. And then all of a sudden, he just pops up, and it's so funny. Because
it's kind of suspenseful, actually. That segment does have kind of a suspenseful moment as well. It's kind of like where they realise the creature's got out of the crate and it could essentially be anywhere.
That's right, yeah.
Obviously following the trail of blood and that. Just a quick little fact, actually, as well. This is something that I meant to mention earlier when we were talking about the second segment. There's actually a sign in the Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill segment leading to Castle Rock, which, of course, is Stephen King's trademark fictitious town. I never actually noticed it upon watching. Apparently, there's other signs in that as well. But I never actually noticed that.
No, not myself.
Yeah, there's a Castle Rock sign. And I believe the episode, Something to Tide You Over, is very identical, actually, to Stephen King's short story, The Ledge. There's a lot of story components that are incredibly similar, which did actually make its way into film in the anthology in 85 called Cat's Eye.
Oh, right. I love that. Actually, I love that segment.
That's my favourite segment, actually. That is my favourite segment of the movie, possibly. I believe the actor's name is escaping me. I do know it.
Is it James Woods?
No, James Woods was in the smoking one. This one it's the guy, Ted Stryker from Airplane.
Oh, yeah, I know the guy you're on about, yeah.
Now, fifth segment. I know this isn't one that you're keen on. This is one I do like, and this is one that makes me squirm, because I absolutely hate goddamn cockroaches.
Right.
I hate them. Cockroaches and spiders are pretty much on the same level for me. And obviously this episode is it's designed to try and make you squirm, and I think it does a good job of doing that. Do you want to go through the segment for us, Darren?
Yeah, basically it's like this sort of wealthy businessman who suffers, from mysophobia, which I believe is obviously a fear of insects. And he's living in like this sealed apartment, and he's basically, his company has bought Pacific Aerodyne, in a corporate takeover.
Yeah.
So a rival businessman then, kills himself, because he, brought all that on.
Yeah.
And he gets a call from his widow, and his widow says, cussing him out, and all this. So basically, he's there known as like a really nasty character.
Yeah.
And as this is all going on, his apartment or, his facility where he is starts to get infested by cockroaches.
Yeah. And as he mentions a few times during the segment, they're creeping up on you. They're not seen brainless and all that, but you got to be careful because they're creeping up on you. And it kind of like starts 1, 2 here and there and that. And he's a really unlikable guy, isn't he? He's a bit of a arsehole because basically he gets a telephone call, doesn't he, from a woman that effectively, blames him for the suicide of her husband. That's
right, yeah. And I think there's like sort of some interaction then, with this guy who goes to, he wants to basically get called for an exterminator and that.
Yeah.
I think it's David Early from Dawn of the Dead films.
Okay.
So basically a big blackout, takes over the city, and he's basically trapped. He can't phone the police. He can't do nothing. And I can understand people who don't, really got a fear of insects, how they would really feel about this episode. It just doesn't really do nothing for me. I thought it was the worst one, if I'm honest.
Okay. No, I really like this one, actually. It's one that there's a sense of claustrophobia to it, because even though, there's other characters he speaks to, he's kind of like on his own. And, with this as well, I believe the biggest cost of the film actually come from this segment. They used, I believe, well over 20,000 cockroaches, and each one cost 50 cents to use.
No, I think the story goes that it was going to cost them 50 cents to use them. So what happened was they got 2 people to fly out to Trinidad.
Okay.
And they brought 18,000 back with them, and then they bred them. So it ended up something like in the hundreds of thousands in the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just to save on money. But yeah, you are right in the fact it would have cost 50 cents a cockroach. But yeah, to save money, they did that.
Oh, because, he obviously, E.G. James in this as well. Obviously the lead actor. And really nice guy in real life, apparently. Nothing like the character he's playing.
Yeah, like a real old school actor who's in a lot of, really famous things in the past.
E.G. Marshall, E.G.
Marshall, yeah. And they said he was a great laugh on set, and but as much as I don't like the episode, there is a couple of things that I do like about it. One being, towards the end, he has a fatal heart attack, and we see that great shot of the cockroaches coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And then a few seconds later, they just rip through his whole body.
Yeah.
I think that's one of standout shots of Creepshow, to be honest, even though I don't like the episode.
Yeah, one of the cockroaches obviously starts coming out the wall, then obviously he's got one crawling up him, and then there's one on the screen and stuff, and it's just kind of like a culmination. It all builds to that. And he actually says he's been beating bugs all his life. He hates them. And I do believe as well, originally it was supposed to be in a carpeted apartment, but due to the cockroaches and stuff, it wasn't going to be possible. That was the original plan. And there's some lines in this one that really kind of stand out to me as well, actually. Like, for example, when the wife of the man that committed suicide phones up and blaming him, and he's like, "How did you get my number to my private residence and that?" And she says, "It was in his goddamn address book, you SOB." And he's like, "Okay, well, I can't fire him now, can I?" He says, he goes, what was it? It was something along the lines of, tell me who give you the telephone number and I'll fire him. And then as soon as he finds out it was him, well, from the address book, he's like, well, I can't fire him now. He's just completely cold to the fact of, he said, hasn't he, that he's only killed, the weak.
That's right, yeah. There's some great, glimpses of humour throughout this film as well, which, it's very old school type humour, but it's really like funny along as well, like.
Yeah.
But, Yeah, I don't know. I just can't.
Well,
get on with
one of my
this
favourite lines as well from this one as well is when he's having the conversation and that, and he actually says, "Why don't you just go out and fuck someone?" He says, "Just make sure you wear a rubber. Everyone's got the herpes these days."
That's right.
Everyone's got the herpes these days. It's like,
and this was what, 1982.
this was 1982. Yeah.
That would have been before the.
It'd be a lot more since then, believe me. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But no, this is a segment. This is a segment I do like. I'll admit, it's not my favourite. It's one that I've come to like a little more. It's one that has an effect on me because, as I said, I absolutely hate cockroaches. So there's an element of fear there for me with this. I would hate to be in that goddamn situation that he's in.
No, I get that. Yeah, it's a lot of people's worst nightmare, really.
Yeah, I mean, cockroaches spread a lot of germs and that as well, and they're natural survivors as well. If there was an apocalypse, they do say that cockroaches would actually survive, whereas we wouldn't. Their bodies are immune to so much, and I think the title's a good one as well. They're creeping up on you because they do. There's a culmination. It starts small and it gets bigger, and I think, aren't they in the bed? When he lifts the quilt and they're all on the bed, aren't they?
Yeah. I think the story as well was going to be cut from the original film due to going over budget.
Okay.
And I think Romero had to really fight to keep it in.
Yeah. There was a lot of cuts. There was actually, I believe, around 10 minutes worth. There's actually 10 minutes worth of footage that never actually got to the final cut. And one of the moments that was actually deleted was going back to the crate. Obviously, when the crate opens, the creature's gonna get out. You were actually gonna see Adrian Barbeau's character's remains.
Oh, right. So do you know if that's in the deleted scenes on the DVD?
I'm not sure, but I do know that it was a deleted moment. It was a deleted scene. We're going to get to see her remains when the crate actually opens. Getting back to kind of fun on set and all that, because obviously, the movie doesn't take itself too seriously or anything like that. It has a lot of fun with what it does. Leslie Nielsen apparently was very much a joker on set, wasn't he?
Yeah, he used to carry around this fat machine with him.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I think Savini still got one to this day, one of his, Leslie Nielsen's fat machines. And he found this hysterical. And pretty much, the whole shoot, I think, was just done on a real, fun, everyone got on and like a happy environment from what I, remember.
Yeah. I like another line in the final segment I like as well. I've just remembered it. What's the matter? Bug's got your tongue?
Yeah,
when he's obviously not answering. Yeah, not answering the thing. Little fact as well that I had no idea about, just kind of a little cosmetic thing, is that two of the characters in the film, the new professors at the faculty in the crate, are called Tabitha and Richard, and they were named after Stephen King's wife, Tabitha, and Richard Bachman, which was his ghostwriting name.
Right, I didn't know that.
Because, Richard, he actually wrote The Running Man, of course, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film from 1987. He actually wrote that under the name of Richard Bachman. So that was just kind of like little nods that he actually put into the film.
I bet there's quite a lot of little nods as well that we don't even, probably go over our head as well.
Yeah. Well, interestingly as well, I mean, Adrian Barbeau and Tom Atkins have actually been in 3 films together. But they've never appeared together on screen.
Right. So obviously The Fog.
The Fog, Escape from New York, and Two Evil Eyes.
Right, okay, yeah.
So, no, four films, 4 films, not 3. They've been in 4 films, but never actually shared any screen time together in any one of them films.
Right, that's interesting. I don't know, without going off topic, what your thoughts are on... Two Evil Eyes quickly,
Two Evil Eyes, I can't give an accurate statement because it's been such a long time. It wouldn't be fair of me to say.
No, that's fine.
It's been a long time. I would need to rewatch it. I will say this. I do like Creepshow 2. I don't like it quite as much as the first one, but I still do think it's a good sequel. And I know for a lot of people, The Raft is considered to be probably the best segment. It probably is, but I do like the Hitchhiker one as well.
I do as well. I prefer Creepshow 2 to this film. And again, I probably not a popular opinion, but I think The Raft is fantastic. I even like the old Chief Woodenhead, first episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're obviously two different. I think there were like 5 years in between each production, so they are pretty different. But for me, Creepshow's more hit and miss.
Yeah,
if I'm honest.
I think with Creepshow 2, obviously that came out 5 years later, didn't it? That was released in 1987.
Yeah.
Creepshow 3, we're not even going to talk about that. Honestly,
I've never seen it, but I've heard it's like an abomination. Really.
Creepshow 3, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. I am liking Creepshow, the series. I am liking it. Again, like any anthology series, it's typically hit and miss. It's not the most consistent of shows. It's not the most consistent of anthology shows. But when it's good, it's very good.
I remember the one episode in the first series with the doll's head.
Which is probably my favourite segment in the entire first season, in all honesty.
I thought that was excellent, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a brilliant episode, that was.
But, I just love anthologies. And I know, this is probably the wrong platform to say this. Inside Number 9... Watch it, people. If you like anthology shows with twists and turns and great humour, some episodes are more horror, some are a little more comedic, watch Inside Number 9. It's the best anthology around right now, and I'll be honest, it's the only modern anthology that is in my list of like top 5, top 10 of all time. Number 9.
I second that totally, because I've seen the first 2 episodes that you told me about, and they were really funny. But I just want to get back into like the ending of this film, where we got the wraparound comes to a conclusion
with a voodoo doll, where there's a slight little bit of foreshadowing before it, because Tom Savini actually appears, doesn't he, in a cameo at the end? He's one of the garbage men.
That's right, yeah, and I just think. Because we get, like, earlier on in the film, or is it during the part with Tom Savini, where we see that the voodoo doll thing's been cut out where the boys bought it.
Yeah.
And, foreshadowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, he uses the voodoo doll on his dad, and I thought that was really well done. And I just think it was an excellent way to end the film.
Yeah, I love
the film.
Yeah, I love that. Obviously, the Tom Atkins gets his comeuppance and that, if you will. Throwing the garbage away and that, and we get there. And that's another little thing I like, actually, because I've been reading the EC horror comics for years, and I used to read some of the 60s horror comics like Creepy and Eerie as well, which were very big back in the day. You used to get what these comics were renowned for. They used to sell things. They used to do little advertisements in these comics, and this film shows that. So it's the level of authenticity that it has there. The fact that you could actually order a voodoo doll from this comic.
Right, yeah.
These comics used to have that stuff. They would be like, order a little Frankenstein's figure, send this away and you'll get this. And I like that. I like that little touch that they've actually been able to incorporate into the movie itself.
Yeah. The actual animated scenes that interact, like we mentioned earlier, are just fantastic. And they, I would love to have actually seen a little replica comic book of this actual film.
Well, there is a comic, isn't there? There is a comic. Now, I'm not going to claim I know what it's about and stuff, but there is a comic. There is a Creepshow comic that came out. I'm not sure if it was right after or at the same time of release, but it was really there to kind of like help promote the movie. And obviously the film has a cult following. Creepshow is a cult horror film. I know a lot of people that love this movie. And just to quickly get back as well, the first segment, Father's Day, did you know originally it was going to be Mother's Day?
No.
Yeah.
I do know there was a Mother's Day, film 2 years previous.
There was. Now, that's the reason. There was a Mother's Day kind of a slasher movie that came out in 1980. And to avoid any kind of confusion whatsoever, it was changed to Father's Day. And apparently the plot of that one was going to be an abusive father terrorises his put-upon servant daughter even from beyond the grave using supernatural means.
Yeah.
Now, I had to look into this because I'll admit I only found this out quite recently. There's huge echoes of that to a Twilight Zone episode called Lightness of the Hour,
Okay.
In which, basically, in that, her father has died, she was henpecked, and, you know, he was very controlling. And what he's done, he's been able to transfer his conscience into a robot. Right, to actually control her from beyond the grave. So he's effectively dead, but his spirit lives on in the body of a robot, still being able to control her. And that's what Stephen King presumably was going to use as kind of an influence for that segment, for that story.
Now, I do know that Stephen King wanted George Romero to direct Salem's Lot. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yes, I have heard that. I weren't sure how true that was.
Yeah, it was off the back of, you know, he obviously had a bit of success with Martin, the vampire film.
Yeah.
But then when Salem's Lot went into, you know, was going to be like a TV production, it sort of fell through, which enabled George then, you know, to go on and make this film.
Yeah. Okay. Because we got Tobe Hooper, didn't we? Because Tobe Hooper directed Salem's Lot, didn't he?
Yeah, and I'm glad he did. You know, I love that film, but and I think obviously he wouldn't have got Creepshow anyway. So yeah, it all worked out well.
So, quick piece of trivia for you, not to put you under the spotlight or anything. Stephen King has had a couple of stories, novels, directed by George A. Romero. What's the other one?
The Dark Half, maybe?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 1993, I think.
Oh, yeah, a film that doesn't really get talked about a huge amount, in all honesty. Amongst all of the Stephen King adaptations out there, The Dark Half I actually think is quite good. And it's one that doesn't really get a huge amount of attention. But obviously...
I've seen it, but I haven't seen it for years, so I couldn't even tell you anything about it. I do remember, isn't there, like... sort of slasher element to it?
There is, yeah. His creation, his villainous creation from his novel actually comes to life, comes out of the book. I mean, you look how many big directors, though, have actually adapted, you know, Stephen King work. We had Brian De Palma, we've had John Carpenter, we've had David Cronenberg, George A. Romero. Moving away from horror, you know, Frank Darabont with Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, and... But yeah, I think we're probably going to have to wrap this one up now. I didn't realise this one's gone for as long as it has. But yeah, Creepshow, my overall thoughts. It's not my favourite anthology, but it's certainly up there. It's one of my favourites. I love the aesthetics of the film. I love the fact that it actually does capture the spirit of them 50s EC comics. What's your overall kind of thoughts on it, Darren?
I like the film a lot. It's pretty hit and miss for me, but it's more hit than miss, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just the two stories, really, that I'm not really keen on, but the other three more, and the Rapper Rain story more than make up for it. So overall, yeah, I would give it a thumbs up. I really, really enjoyed the film.
Anything with Tom Atkins in is worth watching.
Exactly.
I'm always happy to see Tom Atkins on screen, and I love him. I just love him. You read that shit? Can you believe this rubbish? Where do you get this shit? Who sells you there? Just, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, definitely.
As I said, like, there were parents, not necessarily using that language, but there were parents who had them thoughts back in the 50s who were like, this stuff is garbage. This stuff is rot in your brain reading it. Now they're considered classics. And they have the comics have a huge fan base. They're very sought after by comic collectors. So that's pretty much it for today's episode. Thanks a lot to everyone that listened. We'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. And thanks a lot for listening.
Yeah, take care, and I'll see you all again soon.
Adios.